We don't need no stinking guests, okay? Actually, we do, just not today. Let's talk about it on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here, because nobody else is. Actually, we had Eldredge on as our guest, and if he loved Jesus, he would be here. All of that talk in his books is just not true.
He's sick.
Well, if he loved Jesus, even if he was sick.
Oh my goodness.
The problem was
use closed captions.
his sickness is laryngitis, and that kind of throws a horseshoe into the machine, and so we'll have him on again later. Meanwhile, you're stuck with us. If you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer. He's here. When Matthew was young, he was poor, but now after many years of hard work, he's no longer young. Our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. Jinx says Thanksgiving eating is good, but have you ever been to a funeral reception at a Baptist church? Now that's funny. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Our one-man IT department, Jinx is the producer, by the way. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in his tech bunker. John is excited. He just heard they've turned the Lord of the Rings films into a book. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. Dr. Bingham is so manly, he's looking into becoming a beard donor. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of this program.
Can't
Kathy just got back from the doctor, and during the visit, they told her, now this part might hurt. Then they showed her the bill. That's good stuff, Matthew. You done good.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean you always do. But
7.2, 7.3.
this had been kind of a surprise to us. We did not know that John was going to have laryngitis. So it...
Nobody had
So
a word from the
Ne-
Lord.
and
Neither did John.
Well, he couldn't talk and tell us.
He didn't tell anybody.
So at the last minute, we decided, look, we like each other, and we sit around and talk a lot around here. So we'll just turn on the microphones and the cameras and sit around and talk. We could talk about nice things like New Year's resolutions, which I don't do. We can talk about Lent. It's coming up, and you're supposed to be sad and put ashes in your tea. And you're
What?
yeah.
I had a
don't-
complete
they don't
misunderstanding
tell you
of
that.
it.
Put
That's
the ashes in a
important.
T shape on your head.
Yeah, okay. And we talk about summer plans, and we could preview some of the programs coming up. Talk about the ones we liked and didn't like in the past. But I thought, let's talk about something a little bit more serious than that, and maybe we can get to some of the more fun kind of things. I was watching the news this morning. I do. I don't know why, because at my age, you can get a heart attack doing that. It seems that I'm angry all the time. And I'm not going to make this into a political discussion in terms of specifics, but just so you know, I really am a conservative. I'm a Burkean conservative. I've been a conservative all of my life. I see that there's certain principles that have to do with orthodox conservatism, both theologically and politically, that I adhere to. They are verities in my life, and so I am very political, and now we've gotten that out of the way. You know where I'm coming from, so maybe some of the other things that I'm going to say and we're going to discuss will make a little bit more sense. I'm fully aware that as we do this program, some of you guys are left-wing pinko commies. And I'm fully aware that a bunch of the others are right-wing reactionary haters. And I would lean in one direction or the other. But I don't want this discussion to be that sort of thing. We can stir it up and get angry again and fight about it. So far as I know, most of the people sitting in this table and the people who are sitting in the booth through the glass window are fairly conservative. So we don't have a lot of fights around here about the particular issues. We didn't plan it that way. It's just that they're sane. And no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
This one just went down the tube.
So we're not gonna, we're gonna have a lot of arguments about issues around here. But I was thinking, because when I watch the news, when I watch Trump, and I don't particularly like him, but he's an adult, and that's refreshing. But I get angry. I get angry at people who are angry at him. I get angry at some of the stuff that he does. This morning they were talking about Ukraine, and he has stopped sending the ammunition or the money for it to Ukraine, at least temporarily. I watched the event that took place in the White House and the fight and the way it went up in flames very quickly. I've listened to the liberal commentators and the conservative commentators on those particular issues. It drives me nuts because I'm a big Israel supporter. It drives me nuts when I see the demonstrators who I think are so terribly wrong. And for a Christian, it is really wrong. Israel's kind of a big deal to God. And I hate the war that's going on there. And I get angry when Hamas violates the ceasefire and all of a sudden we're back to another war. I would like to see peace in Ukraine. I don't see Russia winning it, and I don't see Ukraine winning it. And I don't like that. I would be pulling for Ukraine, but that's not going to happen. And so all of these millions of people have had their country destroyed, and another 2 million have died. And something really needs to be done. And I get angry when people don't want to do anything. Well, you get the idea. I could give you 10 more issues about that. But the issue is this: how should I, and I'm a committed Orthodox Christian, how should I react and deal with and talk about and think through political issues as a Christian? I think that's different than for a pagan. I mean, I think they can be angry all they want. They can get a gun if they'd like to. They can kick posteriors if they want to. They can get on social media and say horrible things about the opposition. But we can't do that. And so, as I've watched the news, and I do a lot, as I've watched the news and the issues, I find myself reacting like a pagan. And so the question before the House is, how does a Christian deal with this stuff? I mean, why should we be different in dealing with political issues than an unbeliever? And I think we should, but I'm not exactly sure why. We could start by saying we believe that as bad as it is and as dumb as they are and the stupid things they do, God's in charge of it. Even the stupid things, yeah. Even the wars, yeah. Even who wins in politics, yeah. In charge of everything. And so when I remember that, there's a sense sometimes, but not always, of peace that God's got this. All right, I'm tired of talking. You guys chime in. You might want to add something like love, you think, or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to sort out because, we think, you want the levers of power, but for good stuff, right? And not for just personal power or to sort things our way. But it's tempting. It's power corrupts, and so we're foolish to think it couldn't happen to us.
That's a good comment. We're going to talk about that when we get back on the other side of the break. I hope we're not being offensive. I really decided when I thought we'll talk about this that I didn't want to beat people over the head or cause you to be angry about politics. There's enough of that going around. I'd just like for you to think about, and we will too, how are we as Christians supposed to deal with these issues in a way that is different from those who aren't Christians? Hey, thanks for being a part of this. If you're just joining, we don't have a guest. We had one, but John Eldredge has laryngitis, and Kathy is very good at what she does, but, she's not God, and to get a guest at that short notice is a little bit difficult.
Or heal John suddenly.
Yeah. You could have prayed.
How about prayer?
But it didn't work, so our prayer life stinks too. And at any rate, we decided to just sit around and talk. By the way, thanks for joining us. If you're not aware of Key Life's newest podcast, it's called Simply Sermons. You can find it on the Key Life app, on your favorite podcast platform, or at keylife.org/Simply Sermons. I brought up a subject at the beginning of the program, and I talked about how sometimes I'm so angry at political issues and politicians. I'm lucky I have a television because I've thrown my shoe at it so many times. And then sometimes I get convicted, and I think, we're Christians, and we ought to react to all of this. It doesn't mean we don't have convictions. It doesn't mean that we pretend we don't care. It doesn't mean that we have to avoid news and read the Bible all the time. But there ought to be a difference, and I suggested that the main difference is that we have a secret that nobody else has, and that is that God's in charge of this mess and every bit of it. If I didn't believe that, I'd jump off the nearest bridge or get a gun and solve the politics in the right way. But I'm not going to do that because I'm a Christian. But there's more to it than that. And if you were here for the last segment, Matthew brought up the subject of power. And then we ran out of time, so talk about it a little bit.
Well, it's a whole PowerPoint presentation, but once I'm benevolent dictator, we're going to get this all sorted out. And I always think of it as, everybody wants power, obviously. I always think of it as being a steward of our country and our history and our resources, and that Christians should want to be involved either directly or at least by voting to say, hey, I think we need to steer the country in this direction to take as best care of this thing as we can if we're in Babylon, we need to work towards the good of this kingdom. I think I would make that argument that that's where we are. But I think there's examples in the past where either side has power enough long enough. We kind of justify this or look past that, and
So true.
it's
In areas like slavery,
yeah,
like when we get the upper hand in the vote, we impose our views from the power that we have because God gave it to us, and that's kind of scary.
yeah. I mean, I see it with our side, and I get it. If you've been told you're a dirtbag for years and years and years, when you finally come out on top,
Yeah,
you want to stretch your legs a little bit. I get it. But there's also, I think like a lot of spiking the football, and it's like, hey, don't we need to get to work? Shouldn't we focus on, not tweaking the other guy's nose and maybe try to find some common ground, or at least push our agenda forward and not just troll the other side?
that's very wise and very true. And power gets to you. A number of years ago, I was the pastor to Richard Nixon. Well, sort of. He was going through Watergate. I did get to know him, but at any rate, because of my position at that church that he attended, I got invited to places you wouldn't believe. I got personal backdoor tour of the White House.
What?
I got to go where Secret Service people only go. I got to meet politicians you wouldn't believe. And then I was in the president's physician's office, and he said, "Why don't you call somebody?" I said, "I'm not going to call anybody." I'd been really cool. I said, "This is nice and stuff," and tried to be calm because power doesn't get to me at all. And so he pushed the phone over. He said, call your wife. And so the White House operator will find anybody, including God, within 3 seconds. And so I said, "I'd like to talk to my wife, Anna." And they said, "Hold on, Mr. Brown." And there was my wife.
Wow.
And I lost it. I said, "Anna, you are not going to believe where." But I remember how heady that was. And I thought, this is dangerous. It's dangerous to me. I had the entire world press sitting in my study when I first went there asking questions. And I thought, I'm God's gift. And all of a sudden I began to realize I could sell my soul.
I can only imagine it's like heroin. It's just
Yeah,
it
really is.
It's an opiate. You're like, whoa, this feels great. And then you could find yourself doing some shady stuff, chasing that feeling again.
Well,
And I don't like that in me. I really don't. When I have an attack of sanity, I say, this is not right. I shouldn't have these feelings. I ought to be different than pagans. But like in most things, my sins are as big as theirs.
well, and it's that's a really dramatic example that very few people would have the opportunity to see about themselves. But I mean, it can be much more subtle. I mean, if you have earned a lot of frequent flyer miles, and so you get a first-class seat practically every time you fly, how do you feel when you have to sit and coach? It's sort of like, I deserve to be up in front after all these miles I've flown, and blah, blah, blah. So it's easy to get used to the privilege and the power, and it's not,
it is.
and it's not wasted just on pagans. Believers get caught up with it too. And it's hard to remember that, we're members of another kingdom first. And,
Man, that is so true and so important that we remember something like that. And go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, and we're running out of time in this segment, but I think that is the important thing to come back to, like consciously come back to over and over again is that we're members of another kingdom. You know, we have responsibilities, like Matthew was saying, stewardship responsibilities. But this, as you've said many times, you know, this is not our home.
So true. I recently have been rejected with a book I published. You know what I thought? I thought, Jesus, I'll give it to you. No, I didn't. I said, don't they know who I am? I mean, don't they know who I am? And very quickly I've repented. Almost, but I'm still upset about it. May talk about that when we get back instead of the subject that I brought up. Don't go anywhere. We're glad you're here. We're kind of just sitting around talking about. We're talking about politics. We don't do that very often. Not because we don't have political views. We have very defined political views. But I kind of brought up the subject, and we've been talking about it. Is how are we to be different than pagans? You know, I get angry because of what's happening in Washington or what's not happening in Washington. I yell, I said to throw my shoe at the television. But how should our reaction to political realities, both theirs and ours, whoever theirs is and whoever ours is, what should be our reaction that's different? In the break, Matthew, you were talking about a friend and a podcast you participated in.
A good buddy of mine, Carl Creasman. He is a professor. He's an author. He's a historian, and he created a podcast series. It's called Unmoored: America Adrift in Historical Forgetfulness. And he has the good premise of ticking off both sides right out of the gate. And basically saying, we start going adrift when we kind of forget where we came from and forget our founding. So, you've got the left here that we go, anything religious, let's just cut that loose. We need to be freed from that. And you're like, okay, you're talking about setting sail from everything that created Western civilization, and it was Christians who created hospitals, and you just want to just cut that loose. That's dumb. But also, we're not creating a Christian nation in the sense of we're going to just have Christian laws and make it uncomfortable for anybody who doesn't believe, because that's also not what we're after. And so, very thoughtfully, he goes through this whole thing, and we discuss it, and I co-host it. It's like the guy who played for the Bulls with Michael Jordan. And he's like, "Hey, Michael Jordan and I combined for 56 points last night." You're like, yeah. I'm like, I'm there, but he's the future doctor here. But anyhow, it's really good. If anybody interested in this kind of topic, I think it would be worth checking out.
We'll have him on sometime.
Yeah.
You said there may be a book coming out.
I hope so. We'll see.
Well, if he doesn't hurry, we could have him on anyway.
He's done the work.
Yeah, he's really done the work.
Smart guy.
Kathy, how about you? You haven't changed your political views, have you?
No, but I was interesting because I was challenged just today by a friend who works for a Christian, I guess we could call it a Christian humanitarian organization.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with using the term. I think our listeners are familiar with, with WorldVision and all that they've accomplished over the years, in caring for children and clean water, and just all of those kinds of things. And they are experiencing right now just potentially disastrous situation because of their funding being cut off with all of this stuff that's going on with
Dodge and
with
all that.
USAID and all that. And I think, here I am, a conservative, and I'm reading stuff that appears, in the news, listening to it, and just various ways about, $90 billion that went to do this and that. And I mean, stuff that's just utterly ridiculous and ludicrous. It never occurred to me that that some of these funds were going to things that were really legitimate, like WorldVision, Samaritan's Purse, and those kinds of things. And so it's like, I feel like you almost, even though it's not helpful, you almost feel sometimes like you just want to pull the covers up over your head. It doesn't matter if you're listening to the liberal news or if you're listening to the conservative news, because you're not going to get the truth, 100% of the truth, from anywhere. So where does the legitimacy in reacting when really, if you stop and think about it, you don't really know if what you're reacting to is the truth or not the truth. And that's that's an oversimplification, but honestly, I had never thought about it. I mean, this person that I talked to today, there is a possibility that she, we see stuff on the news where we see people walking out of, Doge buildings, because they've been let go. Well, here's somebody that works for a Christian organization who's concerned that she may very well lose her employment because the funds are not there, and it's like, it's back to what you were saying. How do you react? How do you react to that? What do you do with it? I don't know. I really don't.
That's very wise. That is wise stuff. It occurs to me that one of the things we got to do as Christians is go beyond the sound bites. I mean, we really do. We need to be the most informed people on the face of the earth. We need to check on facts. We need to read books. We need to see what's going on behind all of the sound bites that are coming from all of the politicians. And as you pointed out, we'll find out if we're willing to do the homework, and we should, because that's what it means to be a Christian. We might find out that things are a lot more complicated than we thought, that a lot more is going on than we thought, that maybe things aren't as clear as we thought they were. I think that's true. So the next time you read a soundbite or see a soundbite or hear a soundbite, don't assume that you're getting truth and all the truth you need. Ask some questions. Go beyond it. See what's really going on. We're going to continue with this discussion on the other side of the break. And it is so intelligent and so wise and so profound. You're going to be really sorry if you touch the dial. This has been a little bit different. Our guest has laryngitis and couldn't show at the last minute, so we decided to sit around and talk about politics. That's kind of a rare thing on this program. Mostly we talk about grace and mercy and love and religious stuff.
We should have had him on anyway, and he couldn't talk back.
That's right.
Do a healing service.
And what do you think?
Nod when we say something that you agree with.
Some good comments have been made, though. How is a Christian to react when you're angry and you have strong political convictions, whichever side? How should we be different? Should we be different with other Christians who disagree with us in the church? My pastor said, there are 80 million people who disagree with you. You ought to think about that on occasion. And a lot of them are in this church. Mm-hmm. And we've got a whole new thing going on among evangelicals. We've always been conservative and to the right, and that's no longer true. There are a lot of people who disagree, and so we got to learn to love each other and do that. George, you were commenting too on...
Well, one of the things that came to mind, I mean, especially if you watch news today,
Yeah.
you're probably going to get one narrative or another and get it reinforced over and over and over again.
That's true.
And so your point about, trying to get some of the other perspective in a cross section and look historically and, do your homework kind of thing. And one of the things that I think can be really helpful is find a brother or sister that you really care about, love, and, can talk to at low volume, and ask them their perspective on things. And you may get some other narrative back and forth, but try and get beyond that and come back to the issues. You've often referenced your friendship with Tony Campolo, and I believe it was he that had the comment, and I'm not going to be able to quote it as well as he said it, but it was something along the lines of liberals are here to challenge the things that shouldn't always stay the same. And then conservatives are here to reinforce and defend those things that shouldn't be changed. And so there is an opportunity for balance, and I think that can be a sanctified balance as we approach our roles as stewards and members of a earthly kingdom. As Matthew was saying properly, as in Persia or wherever, in Babylon, support the city, build the city, have families, have businesses, and so forth, but recognize you're a member of another kingdom. But, it can be helpful to try and, get help from your liberal or conservative brother or sister to move toward doing the right thing, quote, air quote, from a God's kingdom perspective.
Gosh, that's good. That's what Tony and I did. For some of you, you may know, for a year, Tony and I did a syndicated television program out of New York. It was called Hashing It Out. And Tony is my liberal friend, and I'm his conservative friend. And we really love each other, and neither one of us had time to do it. We did what you just said. But we decided we had to demonstrate how two people who disagree profoundly about everything but Jesus could still love each other and still talk about the issues. And we talked about every issue you can imagine and disagreed on most of them. And as you know, Tony's home with Jesus now, but he used to say, or I used to say, but we both agreed that we wanted the same thing. We just saw different ways of getting to the same thing. Tony called me a couple of days before he died and said goodbye. I didn't know that he was dying, and his voice was very weak, and he said, I just want to say I love you. And I said, Tony, I love you too. And we were going to debate here a couple of years ago here in Orlando, and Tony came out for gay marriage. All of his friends disposed of him and turned their backs on him. And he called me, and he said, Steve, if you don't want to do that debate, I love you, and that'll be fine. And I said, Tony, what are you, a fruitcake? You're my friend. I'm not going to turn my back on you. This is just another one of your wacko views. I mean, I'd have left you a long time ago, given the stack of wacko views. And he got emotional, almost cried, and passed the phone to his wife, Peggy. And I said, how you guys doing? And she said, well, we're doing okay, as long as we have a friend like you. That's what we need, is a friend who disagrees, a friend that we would go through a wall for, even if they voted for Biden or Harris or Trump. A friend, as you said, we could sit down and talk about those kinds of things, and we don't have that. I think what you said is really wise. It really is. And I think your friend, and you really put yourself down. You do that all the time. I wish you'd quit that. I'm gonna fix it. You're one of the most gifted guys I've ever known.
Thank you.
And but I loved what you said, that he said, and I'm sure you said it too, that we've just got to be so careful. Guys, this is not it. I mean, nobody's saved by politics. This is not it. It has something to do with something that is eternal. And that's what we're about. That doesn't mean we don't have convictions, that we don't get angry on occasion, that we don't lift up our truths strongly and clearly. But it does mean that there's something here that is more important than that. And I hope so. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree.
Well, I hope so too.
Because if there isn't, we're in really bad trouble.
Yeah, I was just thinking if it's not, we're in a whole lot more trouble than just the fact that we can't agree on politics. That's nothing.
I was reading this morning the New York C.S. Lewis Society bulletin, and I've taken it for 40 years. Comes out every 3 or 4 weeks. And this morning's was about, I guess that's what got me thinking about this subject, was C.S. Lewis and his political views. And the interesting thing about him is that he saw a universal agreement at the heart of all of this that was God-given. And if we can find that and we can talk about it, he called it the Tao, and he called it a lot of other things, but it was a moral, ethical agreement that everybody knows, even if they don't admit it. It's what caused Tony to be able to say, you and I want the same things. We're just looking at different ways to get there. Find other Christians who want exactly what you want, but who disagree with you about how to get there. And then call me, and I'll straighten both of you out, because everybody knows that I'm ordained and I'm right. An interesting hour, and if you missed most of it, we solved all of the political and sociological and emotional issues. Boys. Finally, we did. The most profound, we're talking about how a Christian reacts differently to politics than an unbeliever. And Jinx probably said the most profound thing, that he said we cuss less. Well, sometimes.
Sometimes we cuss more.
Yeah, right. But you know, at the bottom of this is the love thing. You know, it's easy to love. For me, it's easy to love conservatives. It's easy to love people that agree with me. It's easy to love people who share my political and philosophical and metaphysical and sociological views. The rest of them are turkeys, and they're hard to love. Can't love until you've been loved. And maybe the difference in how we react has to do with that. We've been loved, and now we can love other people. Even do what you said, George, find a brother or sister with whom we disagree. You can't pull that off except when you've been loved enough to love them back. Mm-hmm. You have any final comments, anybody?
Other than who's on next week?
I think we got it all fixed.
Since we fixed all these political, we're going to do more of this. Sit around and talk about some issues, but we're going to continue, as always, to talk about God's grace and mercy and forgiveness, and that if you run to Him, He won't be angry at you. Kathy, who is next week?
Well, next week we're going to talk about Satan. So
which president is that?
Actually, our friend Jared Brock is going to be with us, and
He's fun.
Yeah, and his new book is titled "A Devil Named Lucifer: Uncovering the Diabolical Life of Satan and How to Resist Him."
Oh my!
All right.
We need to pray for him. He's probably going to get COVID.
Yeah,
I
seeing good health.
Or maybe laryngitis. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. This may be a conspiracy in the heavens against this broadcast. Maybe if you guys would be nicer and more faithful and obedient.
Us?
Let's not put all our eggs in that basket.
Us?
Look, only one of us can sin at a time.
Guys, we're going to be back next week, same time, same place. Going to talk about the devil, and it's going to be a devil of a program.
Oh, good grief.
It's better than prayer.
Hope you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.